Hi everybody, this is Dr. Daulton from Hammond Chiropractic, and I was doing a little research online. Sometimes I like to just go and just see what kind of things are being researched within chiropractic and within healthcare in general, and I came across a really interesting article that I wanted to share with you guys today. This article was published in the Journal of Headache Pain in April of 2011. It's titled Manual Therapies for Migraine, a Systematic Review, and basically what they were looking at was migraine headaches and the different treatments as related to that. They say that the most common treatment for migraine headaches right now is medications. And there's two medications in particular that they usually prescribe for migraines. The first one is called propranolol, and the second one is called topiramate. And you may actually know that one as Topamax. But what they were saying was that a lot of people cannot take these medications because there are a lot of very serious side effects with them. And most people either have a reaction to the medication itself, or they're afraid of the reactions that they could have, so they choose not to take it at all. And what they were looking at in this article was how does the success rate of the medications compare to that of manual therapies, which in this case would be considered chiropractic adjustments or massage therapy. And what they found is that the success rate is identical, that people respond just as well to these manual therapies as they do to the medications, and there aren't any side effects, or aren't any negative side effects at least, compared to what the medications are. And I'll tell you, if you look these medications up online and you see what the side effects are, you might be a little bit shocked and you would understand why many people would choose not to take these. But what I want to do in the video here today is I want to talk about just headaches in general, because chiropractic is very, very effective in helping people experience relief from all types of headaches. Now, there are different classifications of headaches, but the very most common one that we see is a headache called tension headaches. And generally, this is being caused by tension that's experienced at the back of the skull, and we're going to talk about what happens with that in just a minute. But before I go into that, I just want to kind of establish the baseline as far as what it is that we're looking for in chiropractic, because you're going to need to understand this in order for the rest of the video to make sense. Now, in chiropractic, of course, we are concerned about a problem called subluxation that occurs within the spine. And what a subluxation is actually when the vertebrae in your spine move out of their normal alignment and they put pressure on your nervous system. So if we look at my model here, what you can see is that this would be what it looks like from the front, and then this is what it would look like from the side. And you can see that what we have here is we have two vertebrae or bones in the back that are stacked on top of each other. There's a cushion that separates them. We call that the disc. And then at the back here, there's an opening that's created between the two bones, and that's where the nerves are exiting your spine and traveling out to control what the body does. Now, there's a condition that happens that we call subluxation, and what that is where the vertebra misaligns. And so do you see how if that bone actually shifts out of its normal position, it's going to put pressure on this nerve, and that causes all kinds of problems with whatever these nerves are going to. Now, when you look at the anatomy of the neck, and I'm going to show you a picture here, what you're going to see is that there are a lot of nerves coming out of the neck. It's a very complicated and serious area, and it controls a lot of things from the body functions that keep you alive, such as breathing, heart rate, blood pressure. All those things are controlled up in this area. But if you notice where these nerves are going to, they control all of the muscles and everything within the face. The jaw is affected by the neck area, all because that's where these nerves are going to. And you have to remember that your nervous system is basically the power source of your body. The way that it works is that your brain is where everything starts. That's what controls everything within you. From there, it sends electricity down through your spinal cord, which lives inside of your spine, and then it comes out through the nerves, and that electricity is transmitted everywhere within the body so that everything can function properly. So if you have a subluxation and it cuts off that power supply, whatever those nerves are going to, they're going to stop functioning as well as they're supposed to at that point in time. So when we look at headaches, there's actually a few reasons now that we've established that basic understanding of what a subluxation is and how it's affecting the nervous system. Let's talk about what causes headaches to begin with, and there's a number of different things that happen here. The first thing that we want to talk about is we want to talk about muscle tension. Now, in the neck area, if you look at the muscles there, what you're going to find is that these muscles actually start down in the shoulders or at the very base of the neck, and they travel up and they attach into the skull. So sometimes what can happen is that these muscles can become too tight. They pull on the skull, and that's what causes you to experience the symptom of a tension headache. Now, a lot of people think this means that the problem is a muscle problem, but you have to understand something. A muscle will not just tighten up on its own. That doesn't happen. The reason that a muscle goes into spasm is because something is wrong with the nerve that's going to the muscle. So if we have a subluxation like what I was talking about earlier, and you put pressure on the nerve that's going to the muscles in the neck, those muscles' reaction is that they're going to tighten up, and therefore you experience the headache. The next thing that can happen is that if you look a little bit closer at the bones in the neck or the vertebrae in the neck, the major blood vessel that feeds the brain actually passes through the bones in the middle of the neck. It actually starts down at about the sixth cervical, or C6 is what we call it, and it passes through the bones going all the way up into the skull, and that's what brings blood flow to the brain. So if you have a subluxation or a misalignment, not only does it put pressure on the nerves, but it also can cut off the blood flow going to your brain, which can also result in headache symptoms as well. All right. The next thing we want to talk about is the jaw. Remember I said that a lot of times the nerves in the neck, they're actually controlling the jaw. One other thing that happens is that if you look at the muscles that attach the jaw, they actually go in and they attach at the back of the skull. So if I have a misalignment in my jaw, or if I grind my teeth, that can actually pull all the way back to my skull, and it can cause a headache. However, the opposite can happen as well. If I have a problem in my neck where these nerves that control the muscles in my jaw are irritated, it's going to cause those muscles to spasm, and the same thing is going to happen. It's going to start to pull against the skull, and now we have a headache again. The next thing that can happen that can cause headaches is actually a little bit more complicated. If we look at the brain itself is surrounded by a very protective covering that we call the dura mater, okay? Now, this dura actually, it doesn't just surround the brain, it surrounds the brain and the spinal cord as well. And what happens there is that there is a fluid inside of there that surrounds the brain within that dura, and the brain and the spinal cord literally just float there. That's basically what they're doing, is they're floating within that fluid, and the dura protects it. Now, if you look at the back, at the base of the skull, between the base of the skull and the first cervical vertebra, there's an opening there. And there's these little small muscles at the top of your neck that attach into your skull, but they also attach directly into that dura. If those muscles are in spasm for too long, they can pull against that dura, and it's just like anything else in the body. When you put force on it, it's going to build up. So the dura can actually get very thick in that area and actually starts to put pressure against the brain itself, but also it will stop the flow of that fluid that's surrounding the brain. And that fluid is very important because that's what's actually feeding the brain with oxygen and nutrients. You see, when you look at the blood supply, remember I was talking a little bit earlier about the vertebral artery. Well, that blood never has direct contact with your brain. What happens is that it goes through there, and then we have this thing called the blood-brain barrier. And that's actually there as a protective mechanism, because what it does is it stops any bacteria, viruses, anything of that nature from getting into the brain. Or at least most of the time it does. Sometimes that system fails. But the way that it works is that the blood comes up there to the blood-brain barrier, and then it has an interaction with the cerebrospinal fluid, which is that fluid that surrounds the brain, and there's an exchange of oxygen and nutrients, and at the same time the blood is taking out all the toxins that build up from the nervous system functioning like it's supposed to. So that's how it's supposed to work. Well, if you develop a thickening of that dura, it's going to stop that flow of fluid and that communication with the blood, passing through the brain and between that blood-brain barrier, and you're going to have a problem there that can develop. And most people will experience that as a headache. Okay, so that's another thing that can happen. The final thing we want to look at here is that at the very bottom of the brain, there's a very important part of the brain that we call the brain stem. Now, the brain stem is what controls all of our vital functions. So breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, these things are controlled by that part of your brain. Well, if you look at the anatomy, what you're going to find is that that part of the brain actually hangs down into the upper part of the neck. It usually goes down to about C2, or the second cervical vertebrae. So if I have a misalignment there, if we look a little closer, remember what I showed you here was that it will put pressure on this nerve. Well, what I want you to look at is this from the top down. So if we look here, and I'm going to bring this a little closer for you so this is a little bit easier to see. Notice how your spinal cord is right here, all right? That's what's passing in between the bones. So do you see how if that bone misaligns, do you see how it's going to put pressure directly onto the spinal cord? Well, in the upper part of your neck, it's not just spinal cord there, it's actually the brainstem that lives there. So if you have a misalignment in that part of your neck, what's going to happen is that it can also put pressure directly onto the brainstem. And of course, we don't want that because that's going to affect not only your vital functions, but it will cause you to experience a headache. So what happens is that no matter what the issue is that's causing the headache, all of these things are being controlled by the nerves that come out of your neck. So when a chiropractor finds subluxation in the neck, and if we correct that problem, what happens is that the pressure comes off of the nerves, all of the muscles relax, the blood flow is restored to normal, the pressure comes off of that dura mater and that area that's surrounding the brain, and all of that goes back to normal, and the headaches naturally go away on their own because you've taken away the cause of the problem, which really was the subluxation or the pressure on those nerves. Now, there's one other thing that can happen here that I want to talk about with headaches because we see this a lot these days, and it's especially something that's common within the younger generations, although everybody has this. And you may have heard of this. It's called text neck. Now, what text neck is it's because we are looking down at our phones quite a bit more than we ever used to in the past. In fact, I remember a time where I just had a flip phone and all I did was make phone calls on it. I didn't even know how to text. I know I'm aging myself a little bit, but that's okay. Now everything is on our phones and people are constantly looking down. Well, if you look at what's supposed to happen in the neck, when we look at it from the side view, there is supposed to be a curvature there. And the reason that curvature is there is because it basically distributes the weight of the skull evenly through the entire neck, which means that no one area is going to take too much of the force of the weight of gravity pulling your head down. When you lose that curvature because you're looking down all the time, what's going to happen is that curvature becomes straight, and now the weight of the skull is constantly jamming the joints of the neck area. Well, there's another reason this is important, and the reason I bring this up as it relates to headaches. The reason that curvature is also important isn't just because of the way that it redistributes the weight through the neck area, but also because of what the spinal cord is doing there. When the spinal cord is in your spine and you have a curvature, it lays there in a relaxed position like this. When we lose that curvature or the curvature straightens up, what actually happens is that it starts to pull or stretch the spinal cord. Now, when you think about it, your spinal cord is your lifeline, right? Let's talk about Christopher Reeves, for example, who was Superman. Well, he had an injury to his neck, and that caused damage to his spinal cord, and what happened to him? He was paralyzed. So you see, if you have damage to your spinal cord, that's not good because that's controlling everything from that point down, and we don't ever want there to be damage there. So when you lose that normal curvature in your neck, it starts to put a lot of stress on your spinal cord, and that can also cause headaches among a lot of other problems. We want to make sure that curvature stays as healthy as possible, all right? So the bottom line with this whole conversation is this. If you suffer with headaches or you know somebody who does suffer with headaches, I strongly recommend that you have that person see a chiropractor before you do anything else, because there's a lot of risk to taking the medications for these as a treatment option, but there's not a lot of risk when you go to the chiropractor. It's something that people really enjoy, it feels good, and it makes a huge difference for people if you're suffering with headaches. So get right in right away. If you're in my area, I would love to help you, and I would love to see you in the office. If not, I encourage you to find a good chiropractor near you, because I'm telling you, it can change your life. All right, thank you so much for paying attention to me today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will talk to you soon.